Hey folks, Scott Jeffy here. Thanks for tuning in. I've been wanting to have a conversation with my friend Jesse Homan for several weeks now, because we are both fascinated by the international student data, right? Just generally, but particularly since the Open Doors 2025 report came out. So, Jesse, thanks for being here.
Yes, absolutely. There's a ton to talk through. So yeah, but I'm excited.
What are the most intriguing or interesting things that you noted in the release of the new data a couple weeks ago?
So I think one of the things that is very interesting about the data specifically is the steep decline in new enrolled students, right? Like both for undergrad and graduate. Undergraduate did see a rise in new students, but graduate saw a very steep decline. We were expecting a decline, but I was not expecting this much of a decline.
I always like to look at whenever I'm talking data with folks, I always talk about the numbers rather than the percents, and I use the percents as the thing that provide the color. That's most often because, I'm always like the data that I'm talking about are helping institutions understand how they're going to fill their slots. I used to say
Right.
seats, but now I'm going to say slots because of online. But this chart is I'm purposely giving those numbers. When we think about like under my stop sign number one, the we lost about 16.6 thousand graduate students. I'm always focused on grad. So over the course of 16 to 20, we lost 16,500 students. Interestingly enough, just to set the scene for what may happen over the next 4 years, um, it's going to build on a foundation at stop sign number three here, where in the last year of the Biden years, we lost 13.8 thousand graduate students. So if if what IIE has already learned about fall 2025, it's going to fall off a cliff, you know?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right. So these data that are on this slide also only report undergrad and grad. They do not report this OPT. We're going to get to what OPT is and why I don't ever include it in a chart, and I know you don't either. Here's the thing that I've noticed. So the Open Doors report, the headline was international grew by 4.5%. Now that will
Yes.
fool a lot of people because they're thinking, oh my God, I thought it was going to go down. Well, remember, it's the year before. So we shouldn't have been surprised with the trends. I mean, look at that line under stop sign number two, the kind of growth we had, particularly at the graduate level over the 4 years, the first 3 years
Yes.
of the Biden term. We shouldn't have been surprised at 4.5% growth. When you take out OPT, which again, I keep on saying we're going to get to, but if you look at grad and undergrad, what I found was undergrad grew, strangely enough, undergrad grew by 4.2%. That was 14,000 extra students. Graduate contracted by 2.7%. That's minus 14,000 students. So they
Yes.
canceled each other out. What have you been saying when you're out there talking about this stuff?
So what I think is interesting about this line that you can see very starkly, and I think is very helpful about this graph, is that um, the rise of graduate international students post-pandemic is currently so much higher than it was even pre-pandemic,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Which speaks and so much higher than undergraduate enrollment, which was not the case. You can see right there, right? Like undergraduate enrollment was fairly a fair bit higher than graduate international enrollment. Then the pandemic happens. Then there's a spike in grad growth, which makes sense because we are seeing more graduate programs that are, more schools are using them as revenue drivers. More schools are trying to get more graduate programs to their portfolio, and they're trying to get more international students onto the campus because of the way in which that drives revenue for them, right? Like, so they want that, and we're seeing it. So watching these lines cross, what that tells me is that it can get so much worse because if we start to see a grad decline because students either don't feel safe in the country, don't feel like they can get into the country and go elsewhere instead, and then when undergraduate enrollment starts to match that because the feelings will be similar in the countries of origin, we could see a very like this is not a number that grads have to like a an average that grad enrollment needs to stay at. It can easily drop.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, w when I built this chart last year, I was making that point under stop sign two that the grad added 117,000 additional students. I remember saying to folks, I think it's in the little asterisks at the bottom, last year, last data year, a third of the net new graduate students that were added to our institutions were international students.
Yeah,
So that it was probably unsustainable, and it is, dare I say, certainly unsustainable now.
yeah,
So as anybody that watched the Open Doors news conference, at the very end, they reported that they've started surveying all the institutions about what fall 2025 looked like. And with 800 plus institutions reporting data, an average 17% contraction in international students. So I've added that line, that deep in our top set of data, the orange or yellow line there. That's what
right.
that is going to look like if at the end of the year. I just used 17% to calculate what that would be overall. That's a massive decline. So let's talk about OPT, but I've always wondered why that gets reported because I've made febrile attempts over the years to try to understand what they are. And it sounded like it was people that stayed after graduating. You and I have both done some investigation and that is what it is, right? Tell us,
Yes.
just let's
Yeah.
camp on this for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
OPT,
So
yeah.
go ahead.
No, you go on. Tell me.
Okay. So OPT is a program, like you say, optional practical training, so that once a student finishes their degree, they can get 12 months of extra time to get a full-time job. Now, there's a STEM OPT that gives you 24 extra months of time to work. But again, these are built for post graduation. So
Hmm.
these students that are being counted as part of the international enrollment figure is simply not it's not relevant for a school to look at and say like how is international enrollment nationally
Right.
going because they're not students.
I think then I think then that they do that because that would demonstrate that there is great demand across the world to come to the United States to study because they
Yeah,
can stay, because so many of them are staying. It's almost like demonstrate using volume to demonstrate demand, attractiveness, etc. Does that seem right? Yeah.
yes, because the way you can compare these two administrations, there was not much higher ed focused international policy that continued throughout the Trump years. There simply like, there was a lot of rhetoric, but there wasn't a ton of harmful policy, and we saw a
Right.
decline even then. Simply, in my opinion, because of the rhetoric, right? Like because of how people felt about the current administration. Within the first year of this administration, we have seen significant disruptive policy with promises of more. I don't know how much the market can bear of this unstable feelings that we're seeing in the market about coming to the United States or whether they can even come in the first place.
Right.
And so, if we continue to see policy of these types as well as increased rhetoric, we could see fairly irreversible decline where people
Well,
just go somewhere else, right? Like, and then
yeah.
the market shifts completely.
Just look at the arc. Well, let's look at the yellow or orange line again. Look at the arc down here over, I didn't, over my stop sign one. Look at the arc in
Yep.
from in the between the last two data points. If our 800 institutions are accurately indicating what's going to be reported, that's that's massive. That
Yeah,
is absolutely massive.
it's the same spike we saw with
Yeah.
COVID, right? Like that means that this administration is having the same effect on the international enrollment as COVID did, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that is startling. It is something that people should be paying attention to. There, we don't know what the fallout of this is going to be, but the initial numbers are very bad. And,
Yeah.
there might be, I can imagine them seeing this as so much of a business loss, right? Like of a monetary pain that is introduced to higher ed that they try to roll back some of their stuff or their rhetoric. But
Let's close this out with what are you telling when you're out there talking to people, what are you telling them they need to be doing uh, to counteract this? Just generally to keep enrollment healthy.
graduate programs across the board need to focus on domestic students. You have to either pivot your programs to looking primarily at a domestic audience and trying to increase your enrollment there, or focusing on programs that naturally, natively have a domestic audience and growing them there. The international audience is in decline. There's nothing we can do about that. This is a policy decision that is affecting the market. No amount of advertising or value-driven messaging or anything like that is going to draw students from places that they can't go. Or like if they can't get here, then they're not going to be available for your program. So you have to be focusing on domestic students.
Boy, I've been saying the same things, and I always want to do a very delicate dance in this. I am an internationalist. I travel whenever I can. I grew up with exchange students in our home. And so when I talk to institutions, I'm like, I don't want this to come across as I am anti-international student at all. I'm just reflecting the reality. I had a conversation recently where I said, look, with what's happening in international, you're going to really have to tune up and hone in to make sure you're aligned with what's these today's graduate students expect. And the person I was talking with, he says, "Oh yeah, I've been following all that you've been writing, but we're not heavily international already. So I don't think that's not really our challenge." And what I said to her was, "Oh, but it is. If we lose international, all the institutions are
Correct.
going to be seeking more domestic. And so
Correct.
there's going to be greater competition for the domestic graduates, the master's student, so on. And so even institutions that are not heavily international now will have additional competition because other institutions will try to become more attractive than they once were, and so on. So I would say that this is really affecting every institution across the nation.
Absolutely. And the big schools that have a tradition of having thousands upon thousands of international students coming through, they're generally going to probably be okay. And if they see declines, it will be small. The down funnel effect of this is going to be smaller schools that have smaller international enrollment populations, losing those populations, and then having higher competition with domestic students among the peers of their actual competitor schools, right? So just like with everything, like with the enrollment cliff, anything like that that is affecting schools, the larger schools are generally going to be fine. It
Yep.
is the smaller, generally private liberal arts institutions or smaller regional public schools that are going to see the truly dire effects of this. Um, that it may not show up in your initial count of numbers, right? Like you may not see it at first because you're like you said, that leader who says we don't even have a large international population. It's
Yeah.
like, well, now you have a double problem, right? Like now you have a double problem where you're going to lose what international students you have potentially, and you're going to have more competition for domestic students. So like it's just going to be a struggle going forward, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's where we are. Oh,
Yeah.
Jesse, this is fascinating. We could go on and on. There's so much else that I know we have on our agenda.
It's
Folks,
fine.
thank you for joining me. This has been great. I hope
Yeah,
everybody's
absolutely.
enjoyed it as much as I have. Jesse, it's always a
Yes.
pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Thanks, you too.